Cars are the most convenient modes of personal travel of all, with more than 1 billion owned worldwide. But there are only a few cars as beautiful and as rare as the ones in today's video. Join me as we take a look at 15 of the most beautiful vintage cars. Number 15. Dodge Charger. If there's any model of car that represents the epitome of American car design, then it's surely the Dodge Charger. First produced by the company in 1966, the midsize vehicle had the same chassis and several other design elements as the Dodge Coronet, but had a newly designed body that instantly made it a classic. At the time, it was sold for around $3,000, which is the equivalent to around $23,000 today. And despite being best known for its rugged and recognizable exterior with its fastback roofline, electric shaver grille, and fully rotating headlights, it was arguably the interior that was the most revolutionary aspect of it. With a full-length center console, bucket seats in the front and rear, vinyl upholstery, and a futuristic-looking electroluminescent instrument panel, it was unlike anything else available on the market at the time. Amazingly, the company built 37,344 Chargers in the first year, all of which had a V8 engine across 4 different options. The most powerful ones were fitted with a 426 Street Hemi engine, and with only 468 of them rolling off the production line, they're one of the most collectible cars to have ever been built in the United States. Number 14. Lamborghini Miura. Lamborghini is known the world over for designing incredible-looking cars, and this was solidified in 1966 with the release of the Miura, which would become the first true supercar with a rear-engine 2-seater arrangement. Surprisingly, what would become one of the country's most spectacular vehicles wasn't officially sanctioned by the founder, Ferruccio Lamborghini, who preferred Grand Tourers over the racers made by companies like Ferrari. And the Miura was, at first, simply a passion project created by Lamborghini engineers in their spare time. Then, known as the P400, Lamborghini soon saw the benefits of a car like this, even if it were purely as a marketing tool to sell other models. So he allowed them to continue with their creation, and the Miura was born. The prototype was only ready a few days before being revealed at the Geneva Motor Show in 1966, and with no time to check if the engine actually fitted, it was put on display with a ballast in the engine bay instead. But despite this, it was by far the highlight of the entire event. There was such a huge interest in it, mainly because of the way it looked, that the company put it into production and named it after a famous Spanish bull breeder. And its place in history as a truly stunning car was cemented after being used in the opening scene of the original version of The Italian Job that was released in 1969. Number 13. Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing. Mercedes-Benz has for decades been at the forefront of car design, but it's a model the company first sold in 1954 that's arguably the greatest they've ever developed. Known as the 300 SL Gullwing, it was based on the W194, which was the company's entrant into the 1952 sports car racing season. Featuring a mechanical direct fuel injection and with a top speed of 163 miles per hour or 263 kilometers per hour, it was by far the fastest production car of the time. But these impressive specs pale in comparison to what was a masterpiece in design. The interior, for example, had a surprising amount of storage space and was color-matched with leather seats. But it was the exterior that truly stole the show. Made from sheet steel and aluminum and silver gray as standard, almost everything was done to make it as streamlined as possible and resulted in an incredibly smooth and slick appearance. High along the midline with an inset cabin roofline, the Gullwing doors weren't so much a creative choice as a design necessity because of the high, deep sill, but it also added to the excitement. And the addition of the eyebrows was done to deflect road water from the windshield, but also to add a small detail of styling to the front and rear on a frame that would otherwise have potentially seemed underwhelming. Even though the company has designed countless incredible vehicles since then, it's perhaps no surprise that true Mercedes collectors all want a 300 SL in their garage. Number 12. Ferrari Dino 246 GT. When it comes to stylistic supercars, there's one manufacturer that leaves the others in its dust: Ferrari. Every true motoring enthusiast has at some point dreamt of owning their own car from the Italian powerhouse, but even they have had their ups and downs over the years. One of the most spectacular designs to have ever come from the design studio in Maranello was the first that Ferrari manufactured in large numbers and was known as the Dino 246. First released in 1969, it has the soft edges and curved lines that you'd expect from an Italian car design of the time, and with its unusually deep-set headlights, it looks great from every angle. Officially classified as a two-seater sports coupe, it didn't sacrifice on performance either, with a top speed of 148 miles per hour, and also able to accelerate from 0 to 50 in 5.5 seconds. And heralded for its responsive steering, this was not only one of the most beautiful cars of the 60s and 70s, but easily one of the most enjoyable to drive too. The Dino was responsible for elevating Ferrari to being recognized as a serious mass producer too, as opposed to a company that focused purely on race cars, and enabled the company to pursue a number of amazing designs in the following years. Number 11. Chevrolet Corvette. Another classic car that harkens back to the Americana of the 1950s and 60s is the original Chevrolet Corvette, which the company produced between 1953 and 1962. After seeing soldiers returning from Europe after the Second World War with Jaguars and Alfa Romeo sports cars, the head of GM's styling department decided they should develop their own model inspired by them, and following the release of the Nash Healey by Nash Motors, the plans went into overdrive. It would be the first two-door, two-passenger car GM had made since 1938, and the hand-built prototype was ready to be revealed to the public in January of 1953. It was so well received that the company was caught off guard and rushed the production of the Corvette to capitalize on this popularity. The 300 built in 1953 were all polo white with red interiors and made mainly from fiberglass. More than 200 are still known to have survived to this day, but while they undoubtedly look the part, people soon began to realize the Corvette was more style over substance. Poor performance and build quality meant that they never sold the volumes they'd hoped, but surely it will always be remembered as the best-looking car Chevrolet ever conceived. Number 10. Bugatti Type 57 Atlantic. There's perhaps no more prestigious a car manufacturer in the world than Bugatti, known in modern times for creating some absolutely astonishing vehicles. But the company has been designing cars for more than 110 years and were responsible for some of the best-looking ones ever. It was a family business, and in the early 1930s, Jean Bugatti, the son of the founder, came up with an entirely new design of car that would be called the Type 57. Created as a touring car and with a top speed of 95 miles per hour, the company built 710 of them between 1934 and 1940, but it was the special edition versions that would become famous. In particular, the Type 57 Atlantic, which was based on a concept car from 1935 and first built the year after, which featured coupe-like flowing lines and a dorsal seam that runs from the front to the back. The chassis was made from pure aluminum, and only 4 were ever completed, 3 of which were known to have survived to this day. This makes them one of the rarest cars, as well as unquestionably one of the most beautiful from the time. And the last occasion that one was sold in 2010, it was valued at $30 million, with estimates suggesting that you'll need at least $45 million if you want to buy one of these the next time a chance arises. Number 9. Jaguar EType S1. The British manufacturer Jaguar has a reputation for building incredible-looking vehicles, but the one that will be remembered as their best ever was sold by the company during its heyday in the swinging 60s. Called the E-Type and first released in 1961, it had an impressive top speed of 150 miles per hour and was based on Jaguar's D-Type race car that had won the Le Mans 24-hour race 3 years in a row. The E-Type Series 1 was much lighter than similarly powered cars at the time, thanks to an ingenious design that removed the need for a ladder frame chassis. And this allowed the designers to focus on the aesthetics that were simply second to none. There's a reason why film productions set in the 60s, such as Austin Powers and Mad Men, feature the E-Type, and that's because it was the epitome of aspiration and remains highly valued today. Likely to set you back around $500,000 for an original Series 1 in perfect condition. If this is your dream car, then you'll be in good company, because according to rumors from Italy in 1961, even Enzo Ferrari himself became so enamored with the E-Type that he described it as being the most beautiful car ever made. Number 8. Shelby 427 Cobra. Designed and manufactured by UK-based AC Cars, but sold in the US under the name Shelby, the Cobra was a sports car that first began to be sold in 1962. As with many models, various different upgrades and versions became available in the following years, and the pinnacle is widely regarded to be the Mark III design, known as the Cobra 427. Designed in collaboration with Ford, a completely new chassis was developed with wider fenders, more curvaceous lines, and a much larger radiator opening. And it had impressive performance too, with the semi-competition version boasting a top speed of 185 miles per hour. Despite being responsible for the creation of one of the most beautiful cars of the decade, the venture became a financial disaster for Shelby and Ford and marked the end of the companies importing cars from the UK. In total, only 56 were made, but with current prices ranging around $1.5 million for a complete original, they're now by far the most valuable of all the Cobra variants. Number 7. BMW 507. BMW is known for a very particular design style, just as much as owners of BMWs are known for their particular driving styles. But it hasn't always been that way. In the 1950s, as the company was trying to make a mark for itself on the world stage in the wake of the war in the previous decade, designers at the company came up with what's probably the best-looking BMW ever. The only problem was that it was so expensive that very few of them were actually made. It was called the BMW 507 and was based on an idea by an American car importer who wanted the company to produce something more suited for the US market. Namely, a roadster version of their saloon cars that, if it was at the right price, would fill a gap in the market. The resulting 507s were almost entirely hand-formed in aluminum and were a shortened version of the 503. This gave them a sporty look, which was how the company wanted to reinvent itself, but the final price was more than double what they had been targeting. Despite owners like John Derrick and Elvis Presley who had two, BMW only made 252 507s before production ceased, something that means in the years since, when the true appeal of its design has begun to be realized, they've become one of the most difficult classic cars of all to find. Number 6. Porsche 911. First entering production in 1964 and proving to be so popular that it continued to roll off the factory line until 1989, the Porsche 911 was built by the German manufacturer to be both a roadworthy car and one that could easily be modified for use in competition too. It's arguably the ones made in the first few years, though, that had the most character, with the bodywork designed by Porsche's two leading creatives at the time. And even though the company has tried to improve upon it by lengthening the shape or using different materials, they've never quite managed to beat the original. At first known as the 901, but changing this because of the naming restrictions in France, the 911 was the company's replacement for the Porsche 356 and took several design cues from its predecessor. It was a massive gamble for the company at the time, but one that certainly paid off, as despite having some handling issues to begin with, the incredible lines and overall aesthetic were more than enough to sell as many units as could be produced. Even though Porsche still makes 911s today, internally within the company they've been known as the 964 and the various other numbers since 1989 because they represent such a change of direction in design. Meaning if you have a 911 that was produced within the last 30 years, you're not driving the version that was responsible for establishing Porsche as one of the leading automotive brands. Number 5. Aston Martin DB5. Aston Martin is known for designing super cool cars, something that's been helped by their regular appearance in James Bond movies. But of all the different models, the one that's most closely associated with the spy and seen by collectors as the best looking of them all is the DB5. With an exterior developed by Italian coach builder Carrozzeria Touring Superleggera, the first DB5s rolled off the production line in 1963. And over the following 2 years, the company built just 1,059 of them. Offering a top speed of 145 miles per hour, the front-engine, two-door rear-wheel drive cars had magnesium alloy bodies, full leather trim in the interior, and even came with a custom-designed fire extinguisher. Also offering electric windows, reclining seats, twin fuel tanks, and wool pile carpets, it was the perfect way to travel long distances in style and luxury. Having now featured in a number of Bond films since Goldfinger in 1964, the DB5 has remained culturally significant, and originals have recently sold for as much as $6.5 million. This continued popularity even led to the company producing 25 limited edition versions in 2020, complete with working spy gadgets like a smokescreen, an oil slick, a rear bullet shield, and revolving number plates, which at the time were sold for a relative bargain price of $3.5 million. Number 4. Rolls-Royce Silver Dawn. Known for their enduring luxury and comfort, if not so much their performance and drivability, Rolls-Royce is undoubtedly one of the most prestigious car manufacturers of all, after almost 120 years of exquisite craftsmanship. The first of their designs to be made with a factory-built body, however, was arguably the most beautiful of all, and known as the Silver Dawn, which was first on sale in 1949. Despite being built at a time when resources were in limited supply due to the ongoing consequences of the Second World War, the bodywork was almost identical to the Bentley Mark VI, but with added Rolls-Royce flair. It certainly wasn't the fastest way to travel, with a top speed of 94 miles per hour. The real distinguishing point here was the plush interior that meant owners wouldn't have minded any extra time spent behind the wheel. Almost feeling like a 1920s or 30s design, but taking advantage of late 40s techniques, it's extremely rare to see an original Silver Dawn in real life, as between 1949 and 55, only 760 of these incredible-looking vehicles were ever made. Number 3. Ford Mustang Shelby. Built by Shelby American between 1965 and 1967, and then subsequently by Ford between 68 and 70, the Shelby Mustang is a high-performance version of the Ford Mustang, and arguably the greatest classic American car of all time. Originally made at the same time as the Shelby Cobra, and sometimes even featuring a Cobra badge, it was marketed as a high-riser version because of the position of the intake manifold. But there was far more to differentiate them from the standard Mustangs. Shelby would take delivery of one from Ford's production line and then add the high-riser manifolds as well as tri-Y headers, larger rear drum brakes from a Ford Galaxy that had metallic linings, and front disc brakes from Kelsey Hayes. Not only did this give it a very different feel to the look of the car, but allowed the engineers to push the performance to the limit. And while they were notoriously lacking in terms of comfort or ease of driving in their first year, they were dominant on the racetrack because of the sheer speed and acceleration they were capable of. In the following year, alterations were made to make the Shelby Mustang more suited to casual drivers, with at least 7 generations before production ended in 1970. And it's probably no surprise that given the car's enduring popularity, Ford decided to revive the name in 2005. Number 2. Toyota 2000 GT. First revealed at the Tokyo Motor Show in 1965, the Toyota 2000 GT is a combination between a sports car and a tourer that, while never intended to be put into full production, was created to re-establish Toyota as one of the world's leading manufacturers in the eyes of the public. Instead of being seen only to produce practical vehicles, the 2000 GT was all about its looks and performance, and is regarded as the country's first supercar, and the first one worth collecting, with perfect condition originals being valued at between $1 and $2 million. Inspired by the E-Type Jaguar, it has pop-up headlights, smooth and flowing bodywork, minimal bumpers, and it rode unusually close to the ground. Even though the interior would have felt cramped for most people, it was certainly comfortable with wooden trim and leather upholstery. Able to reach 135 miles per hour, its handling was sublime. And this led the 2000 GT to set 13 FIA world records for speed and endurance in 1966. Also featured in the Bond movie You Only Live Twice, only 351 2000 GTs were ultimately made by the company, with the whereabouts of most of them now being a complete mystery. Number 1. Ferrari 250 GTO. There's no doubt that, across the decades, Ferrari has established itself as the leading car design company in the world. And while there are plenty of models to choose from that are miles ahead of the competition in terms of how they look, there's one that leaves every other Ferrari in its dust, the 250 GTO. Currently holding the record as the world's most expensive car, after one was sold in 2018 for a cool $70 million, it's easy to see why collectors have become obsessive about it. The 250 GTO was designed by the company in the early 1960s for entry into the Group 3 Grand Touring car race category and powered by a Colombo V12 engine and had a top speed of 177 miles per hour. Just 36 were produced between 1962 and 1964, and they were sold in the US for $18,000, but only to customers who had been approved by Enzo Ferrari himself. Unusually, and perhaps the reason why the 250 GTO became one of the most beautiful cars ever, is the fact that unlike most other models from the time, there wasn't a single designer responsible for its aesthetics. That's because during its development, the design team at Ferrari were all fired, so the 250 GTO actually had two lead designers and was a collaborative effort. The company had decided to use relatively uninspiring mechanics inside the car, so much of the focus of the design, and the obvious way to increase performance was on aerodynamics. This was one of the first Ferraris to be fully tested in a wind tunnel, and the things the team learned are what led to the long, low nose, the small radiator inlet, and the use of a rear spoiler and a hidden spoiler underneath. The 250 GTO is, without a doubt, the epitome of classic car design in both for how it looks and how it performs, and makes you wonder whether any manufacturer will ever create something cooler or more desirable than this.
Watch our Vehicles playlist for more top 15 videos about amazing vehicles. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best vehicle videos.